In Joe Jesson's talk, he presented a series of wireless data security examples from history. The first example was Germany's use of encrypted Morse code messages during World War II, and Britain's efforts to intercept and decrypt German messages. Here is a typical German communication scenario. A three-person team formats the German general's message, encrypts it, and transmits it. Here is a more detailed view of the German Enigma machine, the machine the Germans used for their encryption and decryption. Because the Enigma key would change each day, the British came up with this workflow to intercept messages and break the encryption keys each day.
On Zoom.
Sorry about that. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So here's the process. That intercept it, that take the analysis of the code, and then the Y operators would again track the people sending it by the rhythm of the code. And then they would get the messages over to code cracking group that resides at Bletchley Park. So Bletchley Park was the focus for the decryption work, and the collection was throughout the countryside, and even in some cases underground with antennas just somewhat covert above them where they could hide the antennas. So Bletchley Park would be in the decoding the message business, and then what we're going to learn is how they got the Enigma. If you use it properly, it's not crackable. You can't crack it. So how did they do that? Well, they cracked it through cribs, and I'll talk a little bit about that because that's applicable today in terms of how to break messaging, encrypted messaging. They had to discover ways of limiting the search space, and the cribs was the real success. And then the mapping, the traffic analysis was done by a genius called Gordon Welchman. And to this day, the NSA uses its term traffic analysis. So what locations are getting what type of messages? And they can look at the frequency of point A, node A, node B, and develop, and Gordon Welchman developed a whole math model of traffic flow based on frequency. So mapping the context and extracting the intelligence. But bottom line, the efforts at decryption at Bletchley Park the historians say they removed 2 years off the war. And Churchill has said this has been the hidden jewel in winning the war. So Churchill, all of this went directly to the war room at Churchill's war room. So this was very important to winning the war. All right, let's see here. Let's see. Okay, so this is an example of Y operators. So the Y operators are below in a tunnel, in this case. And here's a Y, and then there's male and female Y operators. Some of the numbers is amazing. Is like 2,000 to 5,000 women operators that was dispersed on collecting messages. And then mostly women. In this particular shot, I don't know the ratio, but again, you have to know Morse code. If you don't know it, you were sent to an intensive training course, to understand Morse code and write messages. Now, the AR88 built by RCA, you can't get started in the world. This is an example of simulator. So there's an example of the preferred interception equipment. And here's what they were looking for: enthusiastic puzzle solver, advanced math background, that they understood German, fluent Morse code, and again, they were trained to be know at least they had to be equal works in terms of the knowledge of code. And they have interesting stories. Now, here's the problem: when you do research in this area, they have complete secrecy act that they were deadly serious. And there were people that were, after the war, if they opened their mouth, they basically were fired and put in jail, or literally taken out as a traitor. So there's history after history of people. If you actually say anything after about what you did during this time, for 25 years, they had a cone of silence around what they could talk about. And as I mentioned, initially you had the Polish mathematicians deciphered it, and the minimum number, the first generation had a minimum number of wheels, and they added a wheel, 2 wheels eventually, to make it harder. Here's a station where Y operators work at. And this is the same RCA receiver set up. So to keep these signal interception reliable, you had multiple systems with multiple antennas, and these AR88s that have a loading system. So it would be the largest signal strength would be the one that switch to dynamic. They would be tied to different antennas. In today's terms, they call it multiple technology, which is multiple. They would weigh the value of the signal, switch to the value of the signal. I might add, each one of these receivers weighs 100 pounds. So this is a lightweight system. Here's an example of the antennas that they had set up above ground. This might be a farm in the UK. The worst case, they could be bombed by the Germans, but there's no giveaway of the link between these antennas and Bletchley Park messaging. And then the Y operators were sent into the 4 to 7 month training. So this is an example of what they did. So here's their sheet. So this is the message was heard. So the 5400 was so 5.4 meg. And RST is the signal strength, reception, quality, and then the call sign, and then the GMP. So the manual constant. And here's what they were required to do: select the 5 alphabets. It's encrypted Morse code. They read the Morse code. You see the notes here. Back there, we got the QRF lot, which is noise. It's shorthand. It's international. PC is this to and anyhow, so this is what they got. So they got a piece of paper or stacks of papers, each operator scattered through. Well, again, this is throughout not only the UK countryside but the world. So they had to get up close in northern Africa. So you had intercept stations in northern Africa to intercept that traffic. Now here's what are the things I discovered. So here's a Y operator who's doing a geolocation. So she's using multiple signals to calculate location, geometry. So we call it shorthand a triangulation, but it's really trilateral. Yeah. Interesting. So this is, like I say, this is a amazing amount of that. So now you got all this paper. What are you going to do with it? So what you have to do is give it to your friendly female motorcycle gang. No, this is an actual picture. From they would run it from the out stations, selection points, and off of airplanes, and they'd run it on a motorcycle. And large teams of women on motorcycles. Yeah. Yeah, I got to blow up with that shot, Rebecca, if you want. It's pretty cool. Very cool. So now, once the motorcycle operators brought all these encrypted messages, or not decrypted, but decoded up to the point where they have the 5 alpha groups. Then they have to make a decision of where it goes. Now, at Bletchley Park, they had all these compartments, and they call huts. So different huts did different things. But you'll notice there's a my research that there's a concentration hut 6. Well, we'll find out who's in hut 6. Yeah. You got a real amazing person that rivals Turing the achievements. By the way, when Turing needed help on his prototype computer, he turned to Gordon Welchman, who ran hut 6. So they were partners in getting done. This guy was a mathematician, professor. And then it goes out to different departments that would specialize, different types of specialize in Navy, others to the Nazi Air Force, So they would specialize and at least get an idea of the context. When you're decrypting messages, you want to know immediately, what's the location, so you get to get the context, and that's going to play a huge point in decrypting these messages. What's the context? Let's see here. So let's zip through here. I mean, it's pretty drab setting. This is inside the hut one of the huts where they heard messages. They had a plastic bezel that would slide and look for German phrases. And then it shuffled these plastic windows around to see if they could.
Oh, we're like a max.
Right.
So they would just
Right.
do this thing around.
Exactly.
Oh,
And it'd be plastic.
but it was by frequency of characters.
Yes. Yeah. So they look at. So these people were trained frequency.
The frequency.
And this is the very laborious process, It's pretty serious stuff. But and so here's what made okay. So here was, I'm jumping forward a little bit fast, but this is the guy that's associated most. This is Alan Turner. So he says, well, this is crazy. You got to automate it, and he really died. And he his first prototype computers did not work. Well, but so he's looking for an automated pattern. So one of the solutions was to get parallel, automated, and in parallel was the big breakthrough. So do this stuff in parallel, and these are all stepper relays going through. And in the movie, they show. I think this is his girlfriend. He had a girlfriend in the movie, but actually they were, comrades in arms, basically, of trying to. And she graduated with a double first in mathematics, Joan Clark. Anyhow, she was involved at Bletchley Park in the decryption, and worked with Turing on the computer. Once the computer started showing results. But one of the things that I found was this guy Gordon Welchman. He ran Hut 6. Well, you know what? He was the spec. He spec'd AR-88 RCAs. You know what his #1 spec was? stability.
Stability.
Well, if you're listening to code, narrow bandwidth of code tone, the worst thing you can do is not be able to track Fritz because your machine is drifting. Comes in and out. Because Fritz's machine is drifting in the field, in the German field. So you got multiple drifting sources. So he attacked the drift problem when they built the machine, designed the machine. And he was the one that personally, Alan Turing was at William Churchill. So Churchill actually came down. So he was gone when he needed supplies of SIGs. You can get the supplies by requesting it directly from Churchill. And Churchill never delayed anything. He had the famous stamp, this day now. He was the opposite of a bureaucrat, you know. He's like, you got it, just do it, get it done. And but Alan Turing wouldn't do that. He would call his friend Gordon Welchman or walk over to his hut and say, you need to tell Churchill this. So this guy was not shy, and he knew what he wanted, he knew what he needed. And so I'm going to go a little bit quicker here. So in my research of Gordon Welchman, of course, most of my research I started following Gordon Welchman. And we know the story about Alan Turing being arrested on charge of being a homosexual, which is against the law, against the law. But they gave him a choice.
Considering the political climate.
Al always accused me of bringing politics in. So. but the fact is, they gave Alan Turing a choice, right?
Yeah, they can do that. So both.
But yeah, so the last day of the so the last day of war, what does Gordon Welchman do? So I'm trying to find out what happened to Gordon Welchman. Gordon Welchman moved immediately. They burned everything. Gordon Welchman is on fire. He takes his wife and they moved to Massachusetts. So we hires him right away as MIT. But what's his first project at MIT? Build the first computer at MIT. So again, you can tell a lot. So he took this knowledge and taught MIT's first computer. And then he also got a job, I think following the MIT job, he had a government job, communications engineering scientist at MITRE. That's a noise of one of the predecessors. On the MITRE, NSA, pre-NSA operations. So he developed communication strategy at MITRE from 62 to 71. Doing really well. This is one of the documentations I found. So he did a battlefield communication of a wind architecture. It looks an awful like the internet. You know, so he takes this bus in the air, that becomes the internet of the battlefield. Back in 62. So this wasn't the word internet, and it wasn't IT, but he did the first concept of a large network that aircraft and tanks can communicate with for the U.S. military. And again, he had his hands in on the spec of this AR-88. So we got one and we rebuilt it, and it's sitting in the, I don't know if it's out, Rebecca, I'm not sure, but it's sitting at the museum on campus, the artifact collection on campus. And it's Sarnoff's comment was, cost no object. And when you look at this thing, like I said, it's 100 pounds, and wonder what are the specs on it. So we actually measured specs. John and I measured specs on this thing, and it's very stable. It beats the heck out of won't go through this. So a lot of this for my students, I said, I want you to go in and simulate the circuit. I gave them the actual circuit to simulate at TCNJ. So we took out the one thing you notice is the RF section. It's got multiple shield. Each section shielded. Well, in those days, what the Germans would detect if there's somebody monitoring by looking at the local oscillator. So each mixer has its own transmitter, but very low. You know, when we had shielded. When you shield it this way, this is the predecessor of Tempest, where you make sure your receiver is not transmitting location accidentally. And yeah, this just shows you all the rebuilding stuff we did. Pretty cool. This is class results where they simulated the front end. Kind of interesting. They ended up finding libraries on vacuum tubes, old vacuum tubes. And you know, I gave it out to all the class groups, teams, and there was one or two that just nailed it. You know, that actually were able to simulate the AR-88, which is pretty cool. The front end. All right, let me go now to the 70s, the Cold War, 60s, and 70. This is the kind of hardware they were using to intercept. The government was using to intercept, and this is all non-encrypted. And you don't have to go back too far to understand most of this stuff is not encrypted. Pager dates, all the pager traffic, first generation cell phone amps. No encryption. With the scanner, cell phone, narrowband FM. So they had equipment like this that were reliable and sensitive, selective interquect. So when Nixon put the bug in, this is the actual receiver. I pulled this off of the evidence file of Watergate. So yeah, I collect these for fun, you know, with these specific equipment. All right, let's keep moving here. So as we get into the 70s, you know, the first area that they encrypted was the Air Force One. Multiplex, and then they would encrypt it. Now, the only problem is when you talk about Air Force One and Air Force Two encryption, the pilot of Air Force One and Air Force Two has a pilot switch. One the problems it had, you don't pick up the additional training protection data. So they tell the pilots come home, looks off and encrypt. And I know this for a fact because I've actually heard it. I've actually intercepted and heard all this stuff. A friend of mine that was tracking all the O'Hare, Chicago Air Force One and Air Force Two. So all the way up through Nixon, Al Gore was vice president. Clear text, absolute clear text. You can monitor all this stuff. And this is what they used to use to monitor it. Anyhow. So the first occasion where it's broad spectrum of SINGARs was this combat communication equipment that supports frequency hopping and spread spectrum. And what they incorporated at that time was everything. If you look at devices at the time, they had here's an FFP box that was added to and it says it's older than late 60s. So you see there's a metal mesh in the front. So that was to keep stray radiation. Because if you have a display, the original tube type display and the new LCD displays, and OLED display, there's a pattern. You can reverse it. But if you get close by any instrument or computer, in the 70s, they had what's called a Van Eyck effect, and you can monitor to communicate, which you're looking at on the screen. And so to prevent that, they would put metal meshes in a Tempest. Okay, so the revolution began in 2010 and 2012. This is where they found they could get by with a TV dongle and allow any hobbyist to look at the spectrum, as Rebecca knows. And she uses it. You use it in the Moore program.
So, project.
Yeah.
And that's the grant that I really received the train fund to do, and this is like part of our, when you see those, the visual display of it, it makes a lot of sense. But why is it called single sided, double sided?
Right, you actually visually see it, yeah.
You can actually see it.
But up until 2012, this was stuff you had to spend over $100,000.
Oh, yeah, but there's this is like- Yeah.
Well, that's before the time.
Done. Oh, yeah, you actually have this whole.
So you want
That's military contract.
$60.
Dongle gets sold for.
No, it's
I know.
they didn't even have a dongle then. So that started the revolution, because anyone who has a course here
But the dongle was originally created to decode European TV.
TV, yeah,
But then people realized,
USB
wait,
port.
the bandwidth of it was like, the spectrum of it was much wider than just the TV thing. We're like, oh, good, we can get, everything.
Right.
So that's how it is.
See, in the old days, you had, yeah. So with the digital signal processing, that's 48. You have the power spectrum. In the old days, you had to actually sweep the spectrum. You had to use hardware and mixers, to sweep the spectrum. So that's why you ended up paying. I think you paid a few extra bucks for gold-plated chassis too, which is great for immunity to corrosion. I mean, again, if you're government and you want a quality setup, you pay the 6 figures for the equipment. Anyhow, so what we've seen is the revolution says you don't have to pay 6 figures for this web spectrum. You can go to, so this shows the MUX system that the White House had operating, dedicated to Air Force One and Air Force Two. All right, so today, now what you look for a pattern. Now I can see the spectrum.
There's the spectrum.
Yeah, so now you got a waterfall. Okay, so this is a spectrum. Each P is a calculated Fourier power. That's the power. So at this frequency, I have a signal. Go over to the 7.11, probably 7.12. And so now I can watch this thing, because
See the side.
you have all these. Yes. Once you see the spectrum, now you can say, well, I can tell what the modulation is if I look at signals. Like this pattern, this is digital transmission. First, red one's up very high. If you see a very wide spectrum, that's the FM. If I turn on the FM, you can see the vessel function. So you see the sideband go out, and you see the subcarriers on FM. So anyhow, I could look at this thing, and I can go from 28 megahertz with a cheap dongle to what, 1700, right?
Yes.
And this is cool. So, so you got all these people now that have tools that only NSA people had a few years before that.
And then in the software, see where it says those, then you can toggle that. So like there, you're on lower side band.
Right, do a time.
And, so you can change that, the different modes. So
Right, so now you can demodulate it. And
You
so it's
listen
built
to
in.
Yeah.
So this work continues. People, I'll show you where things are going.
Right.
I call my hack GQRX. It's a little program I wrote. No, I mean, I'm just saying you got an author of it. And there's I could give you the link. And there's one guy that takes all these applications, and when he sees one, he integrates it into his Linux distribution, and then he hands it out. So it's just amazing. And this, anyhow, just what you'll see here, and fast forward here. So I had this set up in my own house in Hamilton Square, and up until very recently, it was narrow in. So I can dial, I can select a key fit and hear my local. 400, close to 400 megahertz. And now they said, no, we're going all digital. This is so. So they ended up saying, oh, now we're trunking digital trunk. Guess what? As fast as they can now with digital trunk. Somebody's written.
Yeah, but did you go? That's like.
25. So somebody's, so like 4 public domain programs. Right. Oh, it's just crazy. That's an interesting demo, by the way. And that's still not encryption. So the Mercer, Hamilton police, it's still not encrypted. It's just trunking. It's digital trunking. Now, the FBI, when they go online, there is moments now where it'll cut out because they're running some encryption, but it's like 90% non-encrypted. It's trunking at this point. But anyhow, so the person looking at these signals say, well, gee, I know what that pattern is. I know what that modulation is. I'm going to demodulate it. I'm going to send it to my tools that do your bit patterns. So I can break this out. Once I have the bit pattern, I look for the sync bits. And then I look for the pattern. And there's tools that'll do that right now. There's tools that allow you to crack the patterns and look at it. And again, most of this traffic's still not encrypted unless you get into the military. The other hobbyists, so you got the dongle, right? You got a lot of people writing code, the dongle. It's just a matter of time. I need someone to do it. But so why not have the hobbyist? Here's code, Mr. Hobbyist. Here's the code that allow you to track your spectrum of your dongle. We'll set up this sort of format, and then set up port number correctly in the firewall, right of the server, which is the slot, 2.5 megahertz slot of your spectrum. Anybody that anybody including allow them. So I did this in my house. I set up the server, and I've been invited to one. Now, there's some long-term problems with it that's been solved, which is this is a map of everybody that's put up a RF spectrum. This is pretty cool because every one of these dots, if I click on it, it'll tell me a URL. I click on the URL and I'm listening to Central or Africa. I can hear all of Europe.
Oh, exactly. You can control their SDRs.
Right.
So
you're on their SDR.
I didn't want this awesome. So
Right.
you go on there and you just pick a random country and
Right.
location. And then you're on their SDR and you're sliding their bandwidth across. Now it's listening, but it's really cool because you're listening to radio is able to receive over in that area. It's a lot of fun.
It's so much fun.
It's hilarious. It's hilarious.
I
There's thousands of people on it.
one of my favorite places to go when I lived in Chicago is Greektown every week. So what I wanted to do when I'm wrestling or I'm taking this, I go down and there's somebody, 2 or 3 people are expecting service. I didn't have. I pick up every local steak and that and 24
Yeah, yeah.
and listen to them.
Listen to the song.
Just really cool. But now here's the door you just opened too. You opened up for,
Whisper.
well, let me back into that. Yeah, let me see what you, okay, so you've also opened the door to demodulating ship communication. So we're reasonably close to the shore. There's a service called AIS, part of the aspiration ship. So shit's not crashing. It all ends up. So here's the problem. I could tell any oil tanker, I can define where the oil tankers are in the Jersey coast.
That's the all.
Oh, I'll give it to you. Yeah, I'll send it out. But anyhow, this is really cool stuff. But you've opened the door now to Newark Airport on my server. I'm pretty, I guess I can hear everything around Newark. I have an outside antenna. So all the here's the aircraft communication. All the hobbyists that have this dongle, hey, this is pretty cool. I can put aircraft digital and voice out on my website. So I can get somebody in Russia, somebody in China, on my server, my own software, say I don't care about music. I want a digital map of all the planes coming in and over. Got it. That's all part of this. So anyhow, that's really interesting. So there's a whole group of hobbyists now that do nothing but track airplanes. And if you really, and just for example, on a 6767, each one of these arrows points to a wireless antenna. So you got planes all unencrypted. You got applications. Somebody wrote this beautiful application that says, hey, turn to these frequencies, leave it on there, and you'll get all this traffic in and out. Or better yet, we got a database of planes. So we can tell you in an instant who's in holding pattern and who's approaching it. So there's all 8 versus all digital data.
When they were doing those tribute flyovers in the beginning of the pandemic,
Yeah.
John DeGood, one of our colleagues, also a professor here, he was tracking. He lives sort of in the Burlington area, so he gets a lot of footage past there.
Right.
And he's been tracking flights forever, and he realized that some of those jets had paused because they were doing in-air refueling.
Right.
So he could tell that that's what they were actually doing because the other one came in. It was really neat. So
Now,
you can find out a lot of stuff.
now what if you live here now?
Yeah.
They're tracking. So this is on the web. I found this on the web. So any helicopters, anybody present, it's all there. So it's all out there. Tell every world president where they are. Literally,
Like where they come from.
by looking at this 8 hours back. So, but Rebecca, you didn't hear the best part. I gotta go.
Oh my God.
Yes. So this pipeline was blown up between Russia and hey, I got every aircraft I know. I got a hobbyist that's in Norway. Flights you can tell who's the closest to the site of the incident. So they went to the airport and covered, and then they said, what flight pattern? And that's what special ops. They got specialized IT. Well, the hobbyists are on to them. They know what the IT is.
Oh, no.
So they go to the Norwegian hobbyists. They got the whole fight of the crew there.
Really?
It's a office, of course. Facebook.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But we got all these hobbies contributing. Here's some other hobbies. And personally, I like transparency, so I'm on the transparency side. Anyhow, but that could be thought of as if you wanted to kill people. I mean, presidents, you can do that. So anyhow, this is what it looks like, a rough figure of the traffic. You can see how dense it is. And as airplanes are not encrypted, so are ships. So this is an example of ship transponders that you can pick up with a hobbyist demodulation package.
Some of these sites accept data.
Yeah. We could put this on your students' dongles and they could see all the ships too, coming into Jersey, near Jersey. And then you got the analysis software, a whole new programming language to analyze traffic, both RF and data. It's called GNU Radio. Okay, so that's another area of experimentation. And then you have, this is what I wanted to show you. So this is a slide I pulled out when I did a report on hurricane hit, no cell, no power. What did they do? They launched a base station. And then, you know how many people there are? 200,000 people. They shut the voice. So that's the good news. Now, as every technology, there's a bad side. Now, when the Chinese sends a balloon over a nuclear launch site, you get some idea. Now, if I pretend I'm a base station, you know what I can do? I can locate everybody's cell phone. I get their insight pattern. I know who you are. I look up, he's with Verizon. I know exactly, I can track him. I've identified he's a worker, a nuclear worker in Montana. Anyhow, so I'm out of time here, so let me get going here. So let's get up to presidents here. So as far as a lot of the devil is in the detail, it's in the software. Here's a guy in Turkey that manages to intercept your cell traffic. Okay.
Sir, one question for you. There's a group on the launch now.
Right.
Actually, I'll pass.
Right.
This is all.
We're all part of this. They could just have them bring them in here. Yeah. As long as they don't take my sandwich. Okay, so here's the problem. What they do is they want to overlay those encryptions. So that's what they're doing right now. Yeah. Yeah, you have to lock it, and you can buy phones too that give you alerts when you do that. So here's a guy in Turkey with a dongle to tell you how you can track all your cell phone. Say, that's an option. He's got the software that'll do all 5G. Plus, he has listen. So this guy's got all the software for a mere, I don't know, $15,000. You can buy the software, and it pops in and runs in Linux. And you can receive it with just their dongle. Works well with the dongle. And if you have a transmitter, he has other features that if you want to jam GPS, you can switch that on his toolkit. So this is how bad it's getting. Okay. So what he's doing with this is he's selling this as a 5G, 4G LTE interception tool. Now, so what's our government doing? So if you happen to be unlucky enough to go to I'm going to check Washington. What the government does now, any riots, any city, they have a drone, electromagnetic drone, that's all the cell phone. You're constantly broadcasting control channels. So they know who went to the Capitol January 6th. They got a map of everybody through these things. So you got, these are for sale to maybe government, maybe non, maybe. This is an Israeli company that sells electromagnetic drones. If you happen to want to spy on your neighbors or anybody coming in your neighborhood. And you have devices like this that was unveiled. So it's a mini drone that collects everybody's cell phone confidential information. The Verizon database, and they have everybody. They can go knock on your door, which the federal government has. They have authorization. So this is how they do it. They have it in airplanes. They got it in drones, MZ drones, and in balloons, MZ catchers. Anyhow, that's pretty much it. And it's I guess the big aha moment for me was to see all this drones, electromagnetic, low flying aircraft that's flying in from the top. The heaters on the wall,